I've noticed we're losing subscribers. Not the YouTube kind, but the kind that swore they'd be in my life forever. Funny how that works. One day you're surrounded by people who claim to love you, and the next, you're watching them walk away like you were just another phase in their lives. By the way, if you're here, do me a favor, subscribe. It's free, and unlike some people in my life, you won't regret sticking around. My fiancée left me for my brother, then came back begging. 2 years ago, I stood at the altar, humiliated and shattered. The love of my life, my fiancée of 5 years, vanished an hour before the wedding, running off with my own brother. I never saw it coming. Or maybe I ignored the signs because I loved her too much. Looking back, it's clear I was blind. My family had never treated me as a priority. My parents worshipped my brother, the golden child. He was everything I wasn't: charismatic, successful, the kind of guy people naturally gravitated toward. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one, always compared to him, always made to feel like I wasn't enough. And yet, I thought my fiancée saw me. I thought we were happy. She was everything I wanted: smart, beautiful, ambitious. But there was a selfishness in her, one I ignored for years. She always had to have her way. She never apologized when she hurt me. I convinced myself it didn't matter because we were building a life together. I was wrong. The morning of our wedding, I was anxious but excited. Everything was perfect. The venue, the guests, the future I had imagined with her. Then, an hour before the ceremony, my phone rang. Her voice was eerily calm when she told me she couldn't do it, that she didn't love me anymore. And then the real blow: she had been seeing someone else. That someone was my brother. She didn't even sound guilty. She said she was just following her heart. Then she hung up. I barely had time to process the betrayal before facing another one: my parents. They already knew. My brother had told them that morning, and instead of being outraged, instead of standing by me, they focused on keeping appearances. Maybe it's for the best, they said. You don't want to marry someone who doesn't love you. My mother even had the audacity to suggest I should be happy for them. My father just told me to keep it together. It wasn't until later that I discovered the full extent of their betrayal. My parents had been encouraging her to choose my brother for months. They thought she was too good for me. They even offered her financial support if she left me for him. They didn't just allow this to happen. They orchestrated it. I walked out of that venue without looking back. I left my family, my friends, my entire hometown. I packed my things and moved to another state, starting over with nothing but a small apartment and a job that barely paid the bills. The loneliness was unbearable at first, but for the first time in my life, I was free. Free from their shadows, their manipulation. I worked on myself. I built a new life. I made new friends. I healed. For 2 years, I had no contact with them. Then one evening I came home from work, unlocked my door, and there she was. My ex-fiancée. Standing on my doorstep. Looking desperate. And the first words out of her mouth? I made a mistake. I almost didn't recognize her. The woman who once stood at the altar with me, the woman who shattered my heart and ran off with my brother, now looked like a ghost of herself. Gone was the confident, polished fiancée I once knew. In her place stood someone trembling, exhausted, and hollow-eyed from nights of crying. She told me everything. Living with my brother had become a nightmare. The golden child, the one my parents worshipped, had turned into something far worse behind closed doors. He was manipulative, emotionally abusive, and unfaithful. The perfect man my family adored was nothing but a monster. They had married shortly after our disastrous wedding day. They even had a child together. But their fairy tale had crumbled. My parents, who once pushed her toward my brother, had turned their backs on her when she failed to meet their expectations. They no longer saw her as the prize they once believed she was. Now she was trapped, alone, scared, and desperate. She wanted out. She planned to divorce my brother but was terrified of what he might do. He had money, connections, and a cruel streak that she had once ignored, but now she was his target. She feared he would destroy her financially, take their child, and leave her with nothing. And after all of this, after ripping my world apart, she came to me for help. She wanted me to testify against my own family. She believed my words, my experience of their toxicity, would strengthen her case and help her keep custody of their child. I stood there, staring at her, feeling nothing but anger. She chose this. She knew what kind of person my brother was. She let my family manipulate her, turned her back on me, and never looked back. And now, after all she put me through, she expected me to be her savior? I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I simply said, no. And I shut the door. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. But it didn't last. Days later, the messages started. Somehow, word had spread that she had come to me, and suddenly people I hadn't heard from in years decided to have opinions. Old friends, mutual acquaintances, even people who had vanished after the wedding disaster. They called me selfish, spiteful, a coward for refusing to help a woman in need. Her former maid of honor, who was supposed to stand by us on our wedding day, sent me a long message about how I wasn't man enough to step up. She even had the audacity to tell me I was proving my family right, that I was weak, that I never deserved my ex in the first place. I couldn't believe their arrogance. These people had disappeared when my life fell apart. Not one of them spoke up for me back then. But now they felt entitled to judge me? To demand that I fix a situation that wasn't mine to fix? I ignored most of it. But the words stung. They had no idea what I had been through. They didn't care. They just wanted me to clean up a mess they helped create. And yet, there was one part of this I couldn't shake. The child. I owed my ex-fiancée nothing. She made her choice. And now she had to live with it. But there was an innocent kid in the middle of all this. A child who had no say in being born into this toxic mess. Would my refusal to help condemn him to the same suffering I endured growing up? At the same time, stepping in meant reopening wounds I had spent 2 years trying to heal. It meant letting my family's poison seep back into my life. I didn't want to be the hero. I didn't want to be the better person. I just wanted to move on. But after reading through countless messages, some cruel, some supportive, all making me question everything, I started wondering, is there anything I can do for the kid, without being dragged back into the nightmare? I even considered calling a lawyer. I should have known he'd come crawling back. Not to apologize. Not to make things right. But to warn me. It started with an email. A short, cold message from my brother, the man who stole my fiancée, the man my parents worshipped while they discarded me like I never mattered. I heard our ex-fiancée asked you for aid. This is a tremendous error. If you become involved, keep out of family matters. You'll regret it. That was it. No pleasantries. No explanations. Just a threat wrapped in a few sentences, dripping with arrogance. I stared at the screen for far too long, my stomach twisting into knots. For a moment, I considered replying, but then a bitter laugh escaped me. Why the hell should I? This man wrecked my life. He orchestrated my humiliation. He was the reason I had to leave everything behind and rebuild from nothing. And yet, he still thought he had the power to dictate my choices. The audacity. I ignored the email, but my brother wasn't done. The phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but something told me exactly who it was. And I was right. It's been so long, my mother said the moment I answered. Not how have you been? Not I miss you. Just a voice I hadn't heard in 2 years, trying to sound casual, as if nothing had happened. And then, without missing a beat, she launched into why she was really calling. The divorce. The family. The child. And most of all, me. You need to be the bigger person, she said. For the sake of the family. For the sake of your nephew. That's when I snapped. I don't even remember what I said. I just know that years of pain, neglect, and betrayal came pouring out in a rush of words I had buried deep. But none of it mattered. My mother didn't hear me. She kept talking. Kept making excuses. Kept defending him. Your brother is struggling. The family is falling apart. Think of the child. Not once did she acknowledge what they had done to me. Not once did she say she was sorry. Not once did she ask how I was doing. Nothing had changed. Not her. Not my father. Not my brother. And that's when I realized something I should have understood a long time ago. I was never their priority. I was just the backup son, the one expected to clean up after their golden child, to take the hits and stay quiet. Not anymore. I told her I didn't care. I told her I wasn't going to fix their mess. And then I hung up. The moment I put the phone down, I felt nothing. No relief. No satisfaction. Just numbness. But that numbness didn't last long. Because there was still one thing I couldn't ignore. The child. I don't care about my ex-fiancée. I don't care about my brother. I don't care about my parents or their selfish, manipulative games. But that kid? That kid didn't ask for any of this. I keep thinking about him, caught in the middle of all this toxicity, growing up in the same suffocating, soul-crushing environment I barely escaped from. I keep telling myself it's not my problem. That I've already suffered enough. That I deserve to move on. But I can't shake the guilt. I don't know what the right move is. Do I walk away forever? Or is there a way to help the child without getting sucked back into the nightmare I fought so hard to leave behind? One thing is certain, I refuse to be the person I was before. The one who sacrificed everything for people who never truly cared about him. I've worked too hard to rebuild my life, and I won't let them destroy it again. But the guilt? It's still there. And I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Was the right move, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was the only way I could take action without being pulled back into their toxicity. I kept my report factual, detailing what I knew about my brother and my family's manipulation, their history of emotional abuse, and how they might try to use the system to gain full custody. I made sure to emphasize that the child was at risk of being raised in an unstable, harmful environment. After submitting the report, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, anxiety, and an overwhelming sense of finality. I had done something. Maybe it wasn't what everyone wanted from me, but it was what I could live with. I didn't tell anyone. Not my ex-fiancée. Not my so-called family. No one. But, of course, the universe wasn't about to let me off the hook that easily. A few days later, I started getting more messages. This time, not just from my family but from my ex herself. The urgency in her emails increased, almost as if she suspected someone had intervened. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Then my brother reached out again. Another email. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you will regret this. That's when I knew. Somehow they had figured out that someone had reported them. Maybe CPS had already made contact. Maybe my family's paranoia led them to believe I had something to do with it. Either way, the pressure on me intensified. I had to remind myself, this is not my problem anymore. I had done my part. I had protected my peace. I had given the child a fighting chance without sacrificing myself in the process. And if my brother, my parents, or anyone else wanted to come after me for that, let them. I'm not afraid of them anymore. They acted as if I was the villain. It was the final straw that confirmed what I already knew. My family never saw me as my own person. I was just a tool, a resource to be used and discarded when convenient. Looking back, this situation was never about my brother, my ex-fiancée, or even the child. It was about control. My family believed they had the right to dictate my actions, to guilt me into compliance, to demand my sacrifice for their benefit. But I'm done playing their game. I don't regret stepping away. I don't regret protecting my peace. And most of all, I don't regret doing what little I could to ensure that an innocent child isn't lost in the same cycle of toxicity I fought so hard to escape. To anyone else dealing with family manipulation, remember, you don't owe them your suffering. You don't have to destroy yourself for the sake of people who wouldn't do the same for you. I'm closing this chapter for good. And for the first time in a long time, I feel truly free. Lesson to learn. This story is a powerful reminder that setting boundaries is not selfish, it's necessary. You don't have to destroy yourself to save others, especially when those same people have caused you pain. Sometimes, the best way to help is from a distance, ensuring the right people step in without sacrificing your own well-being. Does this story resonate with you? Have you ever struggled with toxic family dynamics, guilt, or the pressure to do the right thing at your own expense? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences in the comments, and let's support each other in learning how to prioritize our own peace while still doing what we can to help those in need. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to like, share, and comment to keep the conversation going.